Welcome to the Barbell and Beyond podcast. I'm Luke Selway, and alongside Dr. Hayden Pritchard and Carli Dillen, we are going to be hosting this one. We had a very special guest, the Mike Tuchscherer, on today, so big thank you to him for coming on. I met him recently in person at a seminar in Brussels, and in just over a month, he's going to be coming and giving a seminar in my neck of the woods in Tübingen, Germany. If you're not already familiar with Mike, then you should be. But I know that there are a lot of people who are newer to the sport and might not have come across him yet, so I'm going to give him a bit more of a thorough introduction. If you've used RPE, well, then you've got Mike to thank for that probably, because he is the one that has popularized it within the space, and he's one of the most prominent powerlifting coaches, especially within raw powerlifting. He started his own lifting in 1997, and since then has won a gold medal at the 2009 Worlds, was first male in USA powerlifting history to do this. He's won 8 USA powerlifting national championships. He's got 2 bronze, 3 silver, and 1 gold medal at IPF Worlds, and he set 3 IPF World records multiple times. And he's competed internationally in both single ply and unequipped when raw. And these numbers may have even been, may need updating on that as well. He began coaching in 2024 for the United States Air Force Powerlifting Club, and since then has coached hundreds of lifters and is the owner of Reactive Training Systems. 6 of his lifters have earned a medal at the IPF Classic World Championships, and 14 of them have earned world records. So now that you know why you should be listening to him, today we got into a few topics for both coaching and for training around VBT, velocity-based training, and how to use that, when to use that, and how within powerlifting that can be different to other sports. We also talked a lot about self-coaching, as he has predominantly been self-coached throughout his career, when to self-coach, how to take in outside information, and how to just do a good job of if you are going to self-coach, as well as we talked about coaching in general and a few of his other coaching and training philosophies. So I hope that you enjoy this one, and if you enjoy it, don't forget to drop us a follow and leave a rating and review. Thanks, Mike, for coming on. After I attended your seminar in Brussels, I was pretty excited to talk to you further about it, and so having the opportunity for you to come to a seminar down in Tübingen in about a month is really cool. And then, the fact that we can get this in before is awesome as well. So thanks so much for making time for this.
Well, thanks for inviting me for the podcast. Thanks for organizing the seminar in Germany as well. It's a lot of good stuff happening this summer, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a busy one. Have you been down to Germany before? I was tempted to say that this is your first one in Germany, but I wasn't 100% sure.
It'll be my first seminar in Germany, I think. I don't think I've done a seminar there before.
We'll claim it.
Yeah.
We need use it.
Yeah, so I'm planning hopefully planning another trip to that part of the world next spring. So it always takes a lot of moving parts and effort to make that happen. Although that's a pretty poor excuse, I think, for all of you guys who travel the same trip basically in reverse to go to competitions and whatnot all over. So,
would that be next spring as in next March?
March or April. I don't think we have a firm date.
I might even be back in New Zealand over that time as well. So
fantastic. Yeah. Well, I mean, the one I've been talking to old friend of mine, Scotty Hill, and so probably organizing something in Australia. But I mean, it's like the same as the last time I came down to that part of the world. It's like, well, while I'm here, may as well make a thing of it.
I literally just did the flight a couple of days ago, and you definitely want to make the most of it by the time you've survived the jet lag.
Yeah.
Cool. Something that we touched on in your seminar, but I thought would be cool to expand on was, I guess, I feel like you've sort of starting to reintroduce VBT into powerlifting in a way. I think everyone was kind of super excited when it first made the rounds, and then it died down a bit, and people were like, maybe RPE is just fine. But then between the seminar and some other content you put out recently, you've kind of been like, actually, let's take a second look at using this a bit better. So briefly, could you kind of give your working definition for VBT, and then we'll jump into like your current thoughts on how best to use it within powerlifting?
Yeah. I suppose something that you're kind of alluding to is that it kind of means different things to different training populations, and definitely the way that I would use it in powerlifting is basically just to help us make better training decisions in terms of putting the right weight on the bar, whatever that might be. And there's a bunch of different ways of kind of determining what that would be. From a velocity standpoint, I think the main thing that you're looking at is either first rep velocity or last rep velocity, and probably the easiest entry point to using velocity in powerlifting training is last rep velocity, because it maps so nicely to RPE anyway. That you can start to establish, hey, my 9 RPE bench press always moves between 0.19 meters per second and 0.21 meters per second or something like that. And it often is a pretty narrow range like that. But that gives you a really good insight as you build out this velocity chart. It's something that gives you a little bit more granular perspective on how close to your limit are you actually. I think a lot of people have this experience where, let's say you take your top single for the day. It's supposed to be a single at 8 RPE, and you take the single and you go, that didn't feel so good, and that maybe we'll say 8.5 if I'm being generous, right? And then you look at the video and you go, yeah, it didn't look real great. And then you watch it again and you go, well, I don't know, maybe it's not so bad. And you keep watching it and hey, actually, I think that was kind of good, and you can kind of see what you want to see if you watch the video enough times, right? And it can go the other way as well, right? I think velocity is a really nice tool to put something a little bit more concrete on that. And I've had this experience where I take 2 lifts, say 2 singles that are a whole RPE apart. That's substantially different, right? And if you like side by side those videos, there is a difference that you can see when you side by side them, but it's not huge, and it's when you do that a few times, you go, oh, I get it. I get why you can do this. You can just watch the video and see what you want to see eventually. So having some sort of objective measurement to go with it is really, really helpful. And that's kind of like the first layer to it. And it's a pretty deep rabbit hole, and you can go as far as you want to go with it, maybe kind of getting started into it as a direction that I'm not sure if you guys want to go into, but I've been guiding more and more of my athletes in this direction somewhat recently. And kind of the place where we start is with the camera apps that you can download on your phone, because they're cheap, they're accessible. It's like, hey, is this even a thing that you like? And we don't do it on every set. You do it on the top sets for the competition lifts, and you just start to use that as an assessment tool. And I've got a guy who I'm kind of guiding through this process, and we've built his velocity tables, and he has this experience just this week where he does his squat single and he overshot it a little bit because externals, he had a lot of things going on the weekend and things like that, right? So he attempts his target weight. He overshot by a little bit. It wasn't terrible, but it was a little bit. And he goes, damn, I wish I would have made a little different choice. And I go, well, if we had like a dedicated device, then we can monitor your warm-ups as well. We can say, okay, your warm-ups are running a bit slow today, and you can use that bit of information to help proactively make some better decisions as well. And so it kind of becomes this rabbit hole. You start simple. You start with something cheap, something accessible, and then if you like it, it grows, and you can develop systems around it and kind of go down the rabbit hole. But if you go, well, that's enough nerd for me, then that's fine. That's fine too. You still get something useful from it.
Cool. Something that came up, I think it was on a Perf Motion podcast, and it was the first time I've heard this, was the use of, I think they did average set velocity. So like across I assume it was average set concentric velocity. So instead of like first or last rep across the whole set, have you played around with that at all, or is that something you use? Or because definitely, like you said, my experience with it was sort of first and last set, and I guess that's what a lot of the literature was on. But yeah, like have you dabbled with other metrics?
Not much in like a systematized way. So like not much when it comes to like clients and stuff like that. I did look at that more when I was doing more volume in my own training. So if you would do, 5 sets of 5 across or something like that, and it's, maybe only small weight changes from one week to the next or something, looking at kind of the total velocity of those, or the average velocity of those sets across, did become a thing where you could kind of look at it and derive some sort of sense of progress from it. Like, well, this week was 5 pounds heavier, and also, not all the sets were faster, but on the whole, things were a bit faster this week. So double thumbs up, But that it was never something that I felt like I was making decisions based off of.
Have you ever, over the course of an emerging strategies block, Mike, because I know obviously when you keep things consistent, it's often the RPE that's consistent. Have you ever applied it in a way to kind of, I guess, almost cap what that, say it's an RPE 8 single or something like that you might cap that at a certain kilograms, but your monitoring of the progress, and it might not even be in the emerging strategy style, it could be anyway, but that your monitoring of the progress is actually, is my speed going up? Because as powerlifters, we get really caught up in the weight on the bar, right? But if we can have a metric that could actually not hold us back, but stop us pushing too far, but we can still feel like we're making progress. Have you ever implemented anything like that with VBT?
I have not, but that's more like true to the original Bondarchuk method. That it's a bit different because they're coaching throwers, right? So for them, the weightlifting is preparatory exercises, but they would do that. They would prescribe a weight, it's the same weight, same set, same reps through the whole training block, and their expectation is that you just move faster, and that's also becoming more sport specific, I think, in a mild way. Over the course of the block for a thrower, it does have a nice auto-regulated feature to it, even for a powerlifter, where you can't really overshoot. You just move it as fast as you can, and that's just what it is, and if you perform badly, then you perform badly. But yeah, so I've never really dabbled with it, though. That would be an interesting experiment to run if anybody wants to give it a go.
Yeah, it was more of a thought of like a way that it may be used with that top set approach, because often the back downs, that work might be similar or change potentially weight choice wise, but it could be a way that lifter that loves to do a single but always finds themselves, that 7 turns into an 8 and then turns into a 9 type scenario. You say, hey, actually your weight is 200 and it's 200 every week for this block. You can adjust the drop backs, but actually the top set will be X. And you're still gonna see your progress, I guess, is probably the way that you'd see it. With the VBT telling you that as feedback.
Right. And so this isn't exactly what you're proposing, but something that I've noticed as I kind of scale up the velocity that I'm using in my own coaching. One of my favorite things about it is that it seems to support better decision making, even without the systematic component of it. Just having that metric there seems to support better decision making. And so, for example, like maybe you have a lifter who in week 1 they do 200 for a single at 7 RPE. In week 2, a lot of times they want to go 210, or something like that, which is aggressive, right? And you get the same thing where the bar slows down, but if you squint a little bit, it doesn't look that bad. And, you go, well, okay, yeah, and we're making, and it feels like big progress. But then if you put velocity with it, it's a pretty short learning curve. And I find that they're not going 210, they're going 202, maybe 205. And the bar speed is pretty consistent, or maybe even improves slightly. Or even if it decreases, if the bar slows down, it's not dramatic, and that to me is much more akin to the actual week-to-week progress you might expect, 2.5, 5, and it just kind of happens that way. It doesn't take a lot of convincing that you ought to slow down the pace of your progress or anything like that.
And I'd have to say that warm-up type strategy that you talk about with the VBT, when I've had periods of time where I've used it a lot more and periods of time where I haven't. And for me, that's been quite a consistent approach. Is there'll be a rough weight that I'll use that's roughly 2 sets out from where I'm going to go for my top set, right? And that's pretty much going to be similar week to week. And I can always be like, okay, this is normally at 0.3 or 0.35 or whatever it might be. And I'm like, oh, that's like a 0.2 something this week. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to think, okay, I'll look at my next set. And then you actually monitor it. Okay, so I'm not going to go with my aggressive 210, as you mentioned, like I'm going to pull that back.
Right.
And for me personally, being, competitive, you always want to add a bit more, right? But it was a really good sense check. And I think from especially when you're coaching yourself to an extent as well, that feedback is so key, because you don't have someone looking at your video and telling you, it's actually you that needs to make those smart decisions. So I love that idea of VBT as a really good, clear feedback mechanism. And as you say, it's kind of like almost the first couple of layers of the onion of VBT, but I think it's such a great reason to use it that has been really beneficial, at least when I've experimented with it myself in the past.
Yeah. So I talk about it a lot in these terms as well. If things are good, you bump the weight up. If things are bad, you bump the weight down. But then there's the reality of like how I actually make decisions in training, and it's a little more meatheadish than that. Like I'll have that warm up where it moves slow, and I go, nah, I'm going for it anyway. We're just going to turn the music up.
Go faster.
Just maybe I'll just try harder, right? And the thing is, like, often enough that works. That's just like an indicator to me that, hey, you could be doing more to perform better. And here's your little kick in the pants to say, all right, you're not all the way here yet on this last warm up. You need to fix this. Or if it's off by a lot, then you get dinged a couple times too, where you try to go for it anyway and it doesn't work out, and then that too is a learning experience where you go, maybe I should just calm down a little bit. Maybe I should come back to center and actually do the protocol. So it's just honest feedback. It's honest feedback.
That's the other piece, Mike, where you said, it gives you that little kick in the pants. I think that's why sometimes using it on things like warm-ups, as simple as that sounds, it actually gets you to take it a bit more seriously, put a bit more effort in. And that's probably the other big benefit, I guess we see from the literature, is actually around the force production side, and how that can be beneficial is that having the VBT giving you feedback each rep and telling you that you were slow, on your first rep of the 5-rep set, you're like, oh, geez. I feel like from an effort perspective, that's the other real big thing I've found with it in the past, is it kind of just gives you, as you say, the kick in the pants, but actually more than that, it helps you perform each rep with a bit more intent, which is a really beneficial thing from muscle producing force. If you're training in a way that is doing that, you're producing more force, that's going to have a benefit in the long run in terms of your training effect. So win-win, I reckon.
It's interesting, like as I've talked about this with people who maybe kind of have a foot in different populations, again, like the meathead mentality works to our benefit, and it just kind of makes, like, how do I use this velocity data point to my benefit? It makes it kind of obvious for a powerlifter or strength athlete for that kind of mentality, whereas if you have someone who's maybe not that obsessed with just adding more weight to the bar and just finding a reason why they can add another 5 pounds to the bar, you do have to educate a little bit on intent and why this is important and things like that, so it becomes self-evident to the strength obsessed, but everyone else needs maybe a little bit more coaching.
It's really comforting to hear that you two are, put on your meathead hat for the gym, because I always say to my clients who train alongside me, I'm like, Coach Luke has to write the program, and then Meathead Luke gets to execute it, because if Meathead Luke writes the program as he's going in the gym, it's not going to go well. So I was like, I have to sit down and write my programs as if I'm coaching someone else, because once you're in the gym, you kind of just need to switch it on.
I relate to that very much.
That's interesting too, with the using it for warm-ups. Something I was doing when I was rehabbing my shoulder was taking that the last warm-up, so second to last one before the top set, and basically being like, if I can't pull this at a certain speed, then like I need to pull the projected top set down or whatever, and using that as, because I think often athletes get to the top set and they're like, oh damn, I overshot. And it's like, yeah, but if you look at your your last warm-up, you knew you were going to overshoot, because like your last warm-up was the speed that your top set should have been. So that's really cool. Going back to like the throwing, the applications with throws, and I know something else you said in the seminar was the difference between how we're trying to use it within powerlifting and then how other sports were using it. And sometimes that can change like the devices that are appropriate to use, because I know some of the accelerometers, work really well at higher velocities if you're doing like ollie lifting or something. But if you're, only pulling it at, 0.2 meters per second or 0.13 or whatever, then suddenly they're not as appropriate. So what do you see as the biggest difference with powerlifting that changes it, where you can't kind of just directly apply the literature that was written in, say, S&C?
I think our use case is just a bit different. You guys will probably all be more familiar, and feel free to guide me if I'm landing off topic here. But I think the use case is just generally different. The bar speeds that we train at are lower, and I just find that probably the best use for something like this is to just kind of operate in the background and help provide that feedback. Like I had a company that was making an accelerometer based device come to the gym that I was training at. This is years and years ago. But it was this accelerometer that clipped onto the barbell, and you had to wait for the device to beep before you started the rep. Then you pause at the bottom until it beeps, and then you complete the rep. And it's not like as a powerlifter, you've got to pause your benches, and you're thinking, okay, well, maybe this will help, right? It's not that level of pause. Like the level of motionless that it needed was just too much, and I'm just like, this thing was so invasive, in terms of like how you would actually want to train. And they're going, yeah, but look, we can set up the app and you can see your velocity right now. Like, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure that's so good, like, and again, I understand from an S&C standpoint, maybe that helps because, you're helping to provide this motivation to people who may not otherwise be motivated. But I mean, I actually think that would be interesting. Like, I wonder if you took like actual competitive sprinters and put it like a giant stopwatch screen at the finish line, does that actually help their performance, or are they better off if they're like focused on their technique and whatever other cues that they have? That would be my estimation, because that's kind of what my experience is as a lifter. You focus on the lift, and then you get a check on the speed like 5 seconds later. It doesn't necessarily matter that it is exactly immediate in my estimation. But I feel like I'm taking that a different direction from where we originally.
I think that's useful, because I know I had a talk with, I don't know if you've read any of Jonathan Weekly's stuff, Dr. Jonathan Weekly. He's a lecturer and researcher in Australia, but he does a lot of VBT research, but it was all like team sport stuff, working with GymAware. And yeah, like you said, like the applications were just were just really different. Something they did use was having, if they had 3 guys working on a rack or whatever, they would give the numbers afterwards so that they could kind of compete within a session and be like, and they were all using their own loads, but they could be like, oh, you're getting a bit slow here, and they got a little bit of intercompetitiveness to do that. But as you said, like it's quite a different use case and quite a different environment.
That would be interesting as well. Like, and again, I just haven't thought about this very much, so maybe it's perfectly reasonable. But like, you'll see the charts that come out as like, and I forget what the velocity ranges will be, but it'll have discrete, specific velocity ranges, like what, like 0.75 to 1 meter per second is pure speed, and then another range is more of a speed strength, and they have these very specific velocity ranges. And I think like when I measure velocity, it's different based on the lift, based on the lifter, the person's leverages. And if I take a very tall lifter doing a squat, a maximum attempt might be like 0.3 meters per second. Where you take somebody who's fairly well built to bench, they can regularly go below 0.1 meters per second.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've seen it.
How would speed strength be the same in these two different scenarios? Anyway, so I mean, it's useful to have like maybe a big rough sketch of where these different categories might be. But I got myself in trouble some years back by I think I made some posts about this, which were not very well appreciated. But kind of in that vein, like I kind of still think this, right? Like that it's fine to have the big categories as long as we understand that those aren't real, that those are maybe some ideas that we can have and some rough outlines to get us started. But in every case, it's going to be different.
I think a lot of those tables that they made, as you mentioned, a lot of them are from the S&C type space. And also sometimes they'll actually be, like you mentioned, about exercise specific. And I remember there were some really specific ones that came out, like a vertical jump should be between this and this. A power clean can be this and this. A squat, the fastest it can go is this. And so it's like, it is really, really unique to the exercise. But I even think what you mentioned there about like limb lengths and stuff, like I'm quite short. And so for me to get an average velocity that is fast on a powerlifting movement is hard. Like I would have to be moving pretty damn quick because I just don't have time to kind of lift my average, if that makes sense, because I'm not moving through the same distance.
So peak velocity.
There's such a range from that would just, because your top or your ceiling might be so much higher, you lift the average up, right, by being taller. So that's why I think when you mention those velocity tables you have, and this might even be interesting to have a little bit of a chat about how you come up, how you go through that process, Mike, of coming up with a velocity table, because I know I went through that.
Sure.
Might have been when I was working with RTS, and it was like, my bench, my squat, and my deadlift all had very different, what correlated with a 9 RPE, what correlated with an 8 RPE. And it became, it was very, very different. Like my bench was so slow. And yet, I knew that if that would like be a max effort on a squat, and yet it was probably an RPE 7 on a bench, for instance. And so, there's such a wide variety. Anyway, I've gone way off topic of what I said, but I don't know if you want to jump into a little bit talking about how you come up with the tables and how you apply that to your exercises, that would be quite interesting.
And can you tell us what are your slowest high scores? What's the slowest you've ever lifted a squat, a bench, and a deadlift, please?
The slowest bench would have been like a 0.08 or 0.09. Deadlift is probably around 0.1. But squat, I can't finish slow squats as much. It's probably more like 0.23 or 0.25 or something. So, that's
Mike
it is for me.
Mike acts like he doesn't know those numbers. I reckon he knows those off by heart, because back when I trained with him back in 2014, he's been using VBT for a decade.
I know those numbers much more than I know. Like if you said like, "Hey Mike, what's your PR set of 5 on squats?" I would have to look that up. But I know my slowest velocity.
Can I ask as well, just quickly, what velocity unit do you use? I know there's Gym Aware and there was Rep One and there's Vitruve. There's all sorts. What are you using at the moment, and why did you choose that one?
I have used nearly all of them, I think, at different stages. Probably not actually, but a lot. And currently, I am running Rep One. I also run Stance. I'm working with Stance more directly, so I like to kind of run those two side by side, just as like kind of ongoing data check. You know, I've run a Rep One for quite a while, so I have a lot of data on that. So it's useful to kind of compare those two. And Stance has been really great so far. I really like what I'm getting out of it, and then also kind of the direction that their ongoing development is headed in. I'm also dabbling with the camera-based apps more and more. Quick VBT is one that I've been playing with a lot. The spelling is difficult, makes it hard to find, but it's QWIK VBT, and I like that one because it does a good job with like multiple rep sets and things like that. And there's something to be said for like being able to analyze velocity from a video. Like as a coach, I have athletes send me videos all the time, and I can just throw it in an app and get a data point out of it, and that's helpful. You can pull video from a live stream or something like that, and overall the accuracy seems to be pretty good, honestly. It's within the margins that I would need for it to be useful.
That's good to know, because often for athletes, the limiting factor is the cost. These units aren't cheap. And for a powerlifter who's already spending a lot of money to be part of a federation, all their equipment, that's probably the biggest roadblock I found. I'd love to use it with athletes. Like you said, it fast tracks their learning. It gets them to sort of anchor their RPE, keeps them honest, can improve their mental skills in terms of effort and focus. But then it's so expensive. So I love that you've just shared with us that the camera version is equally useful. That's great.
The big, so all tools have negatives, and I'm a strong believer that we have to be upfront with that. So just to be transparent, the biggest negatives that I see with the camera apps is less about accuracy and more just about workflow. It's a little bit of a pain to edit the video and to, you know, like if you're doing it with one top set on your comp lifts each week, it's no big deal. But if you wanted to do that with every single set, it would be a pain. So that makes it really good for certain sets or just getting started into VBT or something like that. But at the point where you go, this is really useful, I want to start tracking warm-ups, I want to track my back downs and stuff like that, you need a dedicated device. Stance is probably next on the price list as well. Just keep in mind that this is still a prototype product that's being developed. So, for example, it's iOS, and it does squat and bench, but deadlift will be a little bit further down the line. So it's really useful in those ways, but those are some of the limitations that Stance is working with. And then you can get into others, Rep One and Vitruve, and even into GymWare and things like that, where the limitations tend to be more cost oriented, in my perception anyway. Yeah.
You mentioned you felt like Stance did a better job than the other accelerometers. Is that just because the way that they're training the like algorithm that's assessing the data is built for slow velocities, or like what's the edge that they've got there?
That's my understanding, is that it's kind of a twofold advantage. One is that they came into this knowing that they wanted to focus on, you know, tracking velocity for the way that most people lift weights, you know, which is more similar to how powerlifters do it. You know, the velocities are slower, and so they're kind of calibrated toward that end. And I think there are some differences with the sensor as well, and that'll be kind of an ongoing thing as the sensor continues to improve. You know, again, stories from Mike doing dumb stuff back in the day. Do you guys remember the Nintendo Wii? It had like the little controllers, and you could play tennis with it, right? Well, that has an accelerometer in it. And back in the day, and this was like, I don't know if I actually had a Tendo unit yet, which is like the original thing, is a metal tube, and it's really old technology, but I don't think I had one yet. But I had this Wii controller, and I found this bit of software that you could download, and it would import like the raw accelerometer data onto your computer. And I thought I could like attach this Wii remote to my barbell and then just take the raw accelerometer data and convert that into velocity, right? Turns out it doesn't work that way. Like if you just pick it up and you wave it around and you put it back down in the same spot, how do I say this? The sensor inside is not accurate enough that it realizes it's in the same spot, so it's got a lot of noise going on, and it can't like calibrate itself to that degree, so just an anecdote to say, like, the quality of the sensor and matching the sensor to the task and all that stuff matters. So
what I'm hearing here,
you were a pioneer in VBT.
what I'm hearing here is Stance needs to partner with Nintendo and bring out a powerlifting game for Wii. So you put whatever 220 on the bar, or 100 kilos or whatever, and then you and your friends have to see who can hit the highest velocity at certain weights.
Hey, I'm into this project. This sounds great.
That's awesome.
I'm curious, do you do most of your training sessions alone?
Yeah. You can tell, right?
And so in terms of motivation, it helps, right? If you're competitive, if you have that sort of meathead element, which a lot of us powerlifters do you find that it has significantly improved your motivation or your focus to give your best effort for every rep that you're tracking?
Yeah, I fall pretty deep into like, the nerd kind of powerlifter, right? Like I want to measure it, and I want to have a good reason for what I'm doing. And when you train alone for a long time, you have a lot of time to think about that sort of thing, and kind of challenge your own beliefs, hopefully, and also time between sets to collect that data. But yeah, it is helpful in that way. Yeah.
Do you ever pair that with specific mental skills training? So using powerful words, keywords, maybe motor imagery between sets, or maybe just even turning your phone off and being more focused, less distracted, because there's some research to show that scrolling on social media can affect performance. Do you ever play around with that kind of stuff to see if you can get more out of yourself?
A bit. I am probably not as far into that as I could be, but there are things that you learn to do over time, like certain like sequences of events or gestures that you do that kind of help flip the switch. I had a friend of mine give a presentation years and years ago that was talking about, and if you guys remember Vincenello, famous deadlifter, he was a couple generations of powerlifter before ours. But anyway, he talked about some visualization stuff that he did, and just like little things, like as he would approach a set, he would he had like and there were like reasons for this that escape me now, but it was something like he would clench his left fist and like snap his right hand or something like that. And I kind of adopted some of these types of things like a long time ago for reasons that are forgotten, but the ritual of it, the habit of it persists. And I think it's as much that as it is anything else, as just kind of becomes, this is what I do to put myself in the right state of mind, so there's definitely stuff like that. I don't spend too much time on my phone between sets, and that's probably a function of just like one, being in a hurry all the time, but then also I have some things I want to write down here. I want to log my velocities and things like that, so it kind of grows to fill the space that exists. When
you say writing there, Mike, are you meaning with a pen, or are you actually meaning you jump on your phone, you're in your Google Sheet, putting all your notes in?
I have an old laptop. Like, I mean, it's like a decade old now. That just lives in the garage and runs Chrome with my training log on it. That's it. That's about all it can do. It's just holding on. It's probably more chalk than computer at this point as well. So
I feel like that's proper lab equipment. I was going to say, whenever you're in a lab in a university, this the device you're using is running, Windows 95, and it hasn't seen the internet in 20 years. And like, sorry, Carli, what were you saying?
I'm really curious. I have a little boy. He's 4, and I know that you've got children. You've got more kids than I do. So how do you juggle everything? Being a coach, owning a business, traveling all over the world, and fitting your own training in. Plus, I know from podcasts I've listened to that you prioritize your family. How do you have any advice? Do you have any tips?
I wish I had great advice. I think I'm really lucky in a lot of ways that, I have my work time, which this gets to be part of, which is what an awesome job, first of all. But like even training, I put that into my work day, which is not a luxury that a lot of people get. But, since I work from home and my schedule is very flexible, my wife's is less so. That means, hey, the kids are off from school today or something like that, then I'm going to most likely pull double duty or something like that. And sometimes they'll go out to the gym with me. My kids are getting a bit older now, which is weird to say, but like my youngest is 4 and my oldest is 10, about to be 11. So it definitely gets different as they get older. Like when they're really small, it's more difficult. And then as they get older, it gets really easier because they start to be able to understand language and, things like that. But, the environment that you train in matters a lot. I'm fortunate again that like a lot of my life is kind of built to support this type of thing as well. Like I picked up a home gym in the very beginning, and have just kind of kept it as we've moved around. So like just having my own space in the garage, I don't have to ask anybody if it's okay if the kids come to the gym. That's, I bring them out there. It's my responsibility. Right. And, so they get exposed to that to a degree. They were out there the other day with their, my youngest son, he's 4, he's got the 3-pound dumbbells and he's doing squats, and he does like 10 squats and he's like, okay, I'm going to go play. And he just like goes and runs in the yard, but I don't know. I think that's cool. I enjoy it. It's definitely a little bit of a different mentality, and it's not for everybody, but that's the process that kind of works for me, I think.
What language do you speak with your kids? So you're in where you are, the languages are French, Dutch, and English, right?
Right. Yeah, mostly French in this part of Belgium, which we only moved here about a year ago. So we're all still learning French, and my kids are probably better at it than I am. Well, certainly better at it than I am. Yeah. We're trying, but French is difficult for me, but we'll get there maybe.
Would most people speak English as well? Would that be quite common for everyone to speak English too?
Not as much in the south of Belgium. If you go more toward the north of Belgium, English and Dutch are more common. And then French becomes less common. Yeah. So it's interesting. My son wants to go play with the neighbors, who speak French, but it's a good motivator for him to learn a bit. And he comes over and, hey, can I borrow your phone? I want to use Google Translate. So there's always that impulse, I guess, to grab the tool or something to make it easier.
Have you been to a powerlifting comp that's held in French yet? Because I know when we moved to Germany, I went to my first powerlifting competition in German. I was like, it was weird having like, the bar is loaded is in German, and the calls and everything, and you're so familiar with the flow of a competition, but suddenly it's in a completely different language. Have you attended one in French yet, or?
Not in French. I've been to a couple that are, more north, and it's still like the commands are given in English, and at least I didn't notice that it was any different. But yeah, so that was much easier. But yeah, I still have yet to be to a competition in the South.
Well, fair enough. I think something that else, talking about kind of your own training, is the fact that you have been self-coached for so much of it. What do you think is important to, successfully self-coach? Obviously, like VBT is a bit of a tool you lean on. Do you feel like you use that differently to how maybe a coach athlete uses it? And like, what else do you feel like kind of needs to be in the toolkit to do a decent job of self-coaching?
Just kind of a willingness to keep looking for answers, I think is a big part of it. I spend more time lately like trying to debrief training sessions and spend a little bit more time doing that kind of with myself as an athlete would with a coach, versus just kind of doing the session and then moving on. Obviously I spend a lot of time keeping good records and things like that, but you do need, you don't need anything, but I think it's helpful to have some kind of group around you, even if it's not someone coaching you, like somebody to bounce ideas off of, or and it's helpful then if you kind of speak the same language, which I've got an advantage there that I can talk to other coaches and, hey, what are your thoughts on X, Y, or Z? Some sort of trouble. I'm having trouble getting my bench to progress or something like that. What do you think I should do? That's really nice, really helpful. A lot of it is, just mentality and a willingness to keep working at it. I find that a lot of people that self-coach for a long time kind of value that as much as they value progress. That, like, yeah, they want to progress, but they also want the satisfaction of having solved the puzzle, like, and it is kind of like a puzzle, right? Like if you had a puzzle and you say, well, I can put this puzzle together, that's one kind of satisfaction. Or you could say, I'm going to hire somebody to put this puzzle together and then I'll have it, Yeah, you could do that. I guess it just depends on what you want to get out of it,
Do you have people that because you mentioned you have like a team around you, have you ever, or do you currently have someone that you kind of actually get to look over what you've done and kind of help you look for blind spots or anything like that? Or is that something kind of over time you've figured out enough? How does that kind of work for you? Is there a specific person you go to and be like, here's my next block, here's what I'm thinking, what do you reckon?
That's kind of ebbed and flowed over time. Sometimes I have done that, sometimes a bit less. Sometimes I spend more time like brainstorming, different ideas or something like that. And I'll want to get that stuff checked over sometimes, but then other times I'm content to just do it myself. I mean, I guess that's another component of this. So I've been lifting for a long time, lifting in my garage for a long time. And one thing about it is that things change, sometimes I'm content to lift with no music. Sometimes I want music. Sometimes it's more focused. Sometimes not. Sometimes I train in the morning. Sometimes I train at night. And it will go for a period of time, and then something will change, and that'll be a catalyst for change. One thing that I've noticed is that we do tend to move every few years. Whenever I move, I usually wish that I spent a bit more time, not lifting in my garage, and like take the time to go to a local powerlifting gym and lift with other human beings, to do that more. So over the last, I don't know, half a dozen years, I've made that more of a concerted effort that, I try to schedule that and regularly go lift with a group of other powerlifters.
Does it boost your performance when you do? There's some research to show that when you're lifting around other people, even if you get a handout from someone else, that you can lift a little better, a little stronger.
For me, it's kind of the opposite. I perceive it as a distraction, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's all the more reason to do it, to be honest. I mean, if you're going to be competitive, you can't be competitive in your garage, right? So you have to get out of the house. So it's
Training
good to
yourself,
kind of
put up with
develop that
movement
skill.
and
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where, you develop these cues, and I suspect that environment is a big one there, that helps you to focus. You get used to it, and it helps you to focus. And then you change that environment, and now some of these cues are gone, and getting like the same high degree of focus is just a little bit more difficult. And I think that's probably at least partly responsible. So like, even from a performance standpoint, just change up to the environment is probably useful.
do
I
you
don't
have
know about
any
you.
big competitions on the horizon? Just quickly, real quick question.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to the U.S. Masters Nationals in about a week. So if all goes well, then I'll qualify to go to the Masters World Championship. This is my first year as a master, and I'm going to try to take advantage of that. Yeah.
The Masters
Welcome
class
to
was
Masters.
serious.
Masters
Yeah,
is
oh,
fun.
geez. I feel sorry for everyone else. I was going to say, I don't know about you, but when I go train, in a gym with other people, my session times get dragged out drastically. Suddenly a 2-hour session is a 3-hour session.
Yeah. I kind of made my peace with that. Like, that's just the way that it's going to be, and I'm okay with that. When I was kind of growing up in iron sports and things like that, it was kind of like this machismo bravado kind of thing, where people would go like, I'm not here to talk, I am, like I work at home by myself, pick up my kids from school. I like to be around other people who like the same things that I like, and this is a great time to talk as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'll stop when it's time to stop, and focus when it's time to focus, but yeah, I don't know why it's got to be so serious.
Some of my clients who train at the same gym as me will sometimes be like, oh, sorry, don't want to sip. And I said, to be honest, you're probably the only person I'm going to talk to in person today. So it's probably good for me to actually have some human interaction, so I don't become too weird.
Yeah. That's probably a t-shirt,
Yeah. Please talk to me. I need the interaction. I'm a powerlifter. Over the course of your training career, do you feel like your relationship with like outside input, or even your kind of, I guess, self-coached relationships changed? Because I know, like, for myself, coaching, newer athletes, even if they've got a couple of years experience, is like very different to like when Carli asked me to help her prepare for Worlds. It was like I was co-piloting. It was definitely like a very different kind of coaching relationship there. Is that something that you've seen within your own self-coaching and how you integrate feedback and stuff, or if you've gone through periods of coaching?
So like the kind of coach-athlete relationship with oneself, is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I guess how with oneself and with external input, like you were saying, you kind of have that circle of people around you. Has how you've used that changed, now that you're a couple of decades into it almost?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, part of my personality, I used to joke that a big reason why self-coach was control issues. But, I mean, it was just kind of it, but it's also like I like to problem solve, and I also care about it a lot, and I know that I'm going to put a lot of effort into it, and I'm sure other coaches would as well, but kind of the combination of all those things just makes self-coaching very attractive. But yeah, the relationship with it, the amount of effort that you put into it definitely ebbs and flows over time. Some blocks get a lot of scrutiny and others are just less important. So it's just not that big of a deal. But I'm a big systems guy as well. I build systems around everything. And like part of it too is like I write my training on the same schedule that I write all my athletes training on. It's just kind of part of the normal process. I kind of treat athlete Mike like one of my clients, and just work it from that perspective, and it all kind of works out okay, you know. And like a big reason behind a lot of the systems that I want to make is, it's like, well, I know that, you know, I'm human, I have human limitations, and I don't, to the maximum extent possible, I don't want my clients to suffer from those limitations. So I want to build systems that help support good decision making, good writing, good coaching, even when I'm tired or distracted or other things like that, right? So I think having those systems is beneficial too. It helps to kind of even out the work quality and probably prevent burnout in a couple ways. But I think all three of you guys self-coach or have self-coached for different periods of time and things like that. You probably have better perspectives on it than I do, like having seen both sides. Be curious to what you guys think about that.
I guess for me, from my perspective, one of the questions actually that came to mind was literally related to this fact, because it's something that with myself, when I self-coach, like, I feel like I trust myself a whole lot less to coach myself than I trust myself to coach my athletes. Like, if that makes sense. Like, I'll confidently write a program for an athlete and I'll be like, this is, you know, going to be helpful. I've chosen these exercises for a reason. You know, this should work. Like, you know, like that type of a mindset, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I'll write one for myself and I'll be halfway through a session. I'm like, did I make the right choice there? Like, is that what I should have chosen? Whereas, and I've always found that to be one of the challenges, is that I can sit there and I second guess myself. But when a coach writes it for me, like when I've had yourself or, you know, Sebastian or whoever it might be that's coached me in the past, like I've had a lot of coaches because I like to kind of look at their systems, look at how they do things and learn from them. That's another aspect for me. But I feel like I I almost like trust myself with my athletes, and I find that's fine and I'm confident and it's good. But then when I write it for myself, I find myself second guessing what I'm doing, which is bizarre, right? Because I'm just another human. There's nothing special about me. Like I'm the same as everyone else. Like I have my own unique characteristics that I need to consider, and I do. But that's one thing I've always found, I guess, strange, and just a quirk of coaching myself, as I start to be like, am I choosing the right thing here? And it's like, Hayden, like, part of it is like, you know, how much difference is there between, you know, a pause squat versus you know, slow eccentric, whatever it might be, like two random different exercises you might program for yourself. But yeah, I'll happily prescribe that for someone else. But for myself, I'll sometimes be like, did I choose right? And I don't know why that is. It's just a strange thing I've noticed. And so I've always had to like write it, pretty much put it in stone and be like, right, this is your program for the next 4 weeks. Kind of like you say, you're writing it as if you're one of your athletes. And this is the program that you're following. So when I've self-coached, that's kind of what I've had to do, is try and flip that switch. But I still find myself second guessing things a whole lot more. And I always thought that would make me terrible to coach, but actually I find myself the opposite. Like I don't question everything the coach gives me, but when I'm the coach, I'll question everything I give me. So that's been my strange thing.
I went through a phase that was like that, you know, and I think lots of people kind of go through a program hopping kind of phase, but it lasted a long time, like probably a couple years. You know, it's just that that's all ancient history by now. And, you know, it kind of came out the other side of it. And, you know, I don't know. It would be interesting to see like what happened if you just kept program hopping for a while. Like, do you eventually settle down and you just like get more comfortable with it? Or I don't know, like it kind of general.
I think I've got better at that as I've coached myself more. I think especially in the initial phases, like Jono made the joke back, this would have been like early 2010s, that he'd be working and my job like had a bit of downtime. And so he'd get an update to the spreadsheet come through to his email. Like, you know, he'd joke that it was every day or something. I'd tweak with something in the program. Like I'm nowhere near that level of, you know, craziness. I can do it a lot better, but I do remember going through that phase where, like literally like you read something new and you're like, chains, like I'm gonna try those. You know, like whereas now I could happily program a block for myself and be confident. I just find myself going, did I make the right choice? That's kind of more the stage I'm at now.
Yeah. I relate to that.
Sorry, everyone else could have a go at answering the
Yeah,
questions.
I was going to say, Carli, I know you have, because I've been involved with some of this, like used coaching like almost phasically, where you'll go through periods of kind of doing your own thing, and then you'll be like, right, for whatever reason, you kind of have a set goal in mind when you use a coach.
I think I've got to the point now where I know what I respond to so well that it's boring, but I know I can tap into a certain microcycle layout that I'm very confident is going to work. And so, like, I like being self-coached because I have absolute certainty in my mind that it's going to work, and I know my body so well, and I know what's feeling good and progressing. And I have to balance that with the fact that I love to learn, and I like to be surprised, and I like creativity. And any other coach's brain, because there's so many ways to solve a problem, is going to solve the problem in a different way to mine. And I really enjoy that. So I'm really happy to get creative and experiment and learn from other coaches. I love that so much. But then sometimes if there's limited time, or there's a very, very big event, or there's time pressure, I'm like, well, I know how to solve this really quickly, really efficiently. I don't have a lot of time to muck around. So I go back to what I know works, but it's boring. So I have to balance that, if it makes sense.
Oh, I relate to that a lot as well. Like that's, I think if I have a tendency as a coach, it's to maybe change things too much or too abruptly. For some athletes don't like that level of change. I like to experiment with lots of different things. But yeah, I relate to that. Like, well, I know what's going to work. I also want to see if this other thing will work, right? Yeah.
So Mike, and I guess to the two of you as well, do you think, or if you've ever had this experience or kind of, I guess, thought about it, that there's a point in your self-coaching that is an indication that you're like, actually, I need to get like more than just somebody else's opinion. Like I need to get a coach on board with that.
Outside of injuries, like injuries are pretty clear when you need help. But outside of that, I had like one period of time where I brought on another coach. So lots of you guys may know that I had a pretty extensive competitive break for a while I was dealing with some back injury kind of stuff, and it ended up being about 6 years. It probably didn't have to be that long, but it was. And during that time, I didn't know if I was going to come back to powerlifting or not. And I kind of went through this period of time where I'm like, look, I'm 120, 125 kilos. If I'm going to come back to powerlifting someday, then I probably need to maintain as much of this as I can. If not, I'm in my mid 30s at this point. I probably need to maintain this. But if I'm not going to powerlift anymore, maybe it's worth spending some time to get leaner. And living in my own brain too much, that eventually leads to maybe I should do CrossFit, or at least like explore what this would be like, right? So I had a good friend of mine. Friend of mine who's a CrossFit coach who like coaches it competitively, is not, one of these, how do I put it this, like low skill crazy people. It definitely not that. So, I talked to him and he's like, well, look, you're 125 kilos. We're probably not going to have you go out for a run anytime soon. We're going to, and you spent a lot of time getting really strong. So like, yeah, we'll do a little bit of stuff to maintain that. But what you really need a lot of is cardio. And, anyway, so I had an infatuation with this for about a month. And I was like, you know what? I just like being strong. So I'm going to go back to that. So
can I just interject there, Mike, and say back when you coached me in 2013 in the lead up to the Worlds in Sistel, you programmed me running, Matt. Just so you know, I still remember the week that I got an email that had like running intervals or something in it, and I was like, "What?" Like I thought it was my powerlifting coach. Like, do you do anything like that anymore? Because that was like in the lead up to Worlds, and I think it was like on a down week or something like that. That there was some conditioning intervals or something. I was like, "What is this?" Like,
it would have been during a deload week, but yeah, I mean, I've kind of let go of a lot of that, you know, and just kind of found other ways to tackle a lot of it too. I mean, that point in my life too, I was still in the military or like just out of the military. So it didn't seem that strange to me, you know, but as time has gone on, you know, things change, and
I was definitely out of my running era at that stage, Mike. Like I've dabbled in long distance running on multiple occasions, but that was not one. And I just remember being so confused that I had running on my program. So
I back then too, like I would pick it up now and then, you know, and I always remember like it's like anything else, like there's a skill component to it. And turns out if you don't run for months and months, you get worse at it, you know. I remember like that first session back feeling like, I would describe it like being like the Tin Man with no oil, and just like everything is like creaky and, you know, uncoordinated, you know, like, oh, I've got to actually get better at this. You know, my running skill has deteriorated, which is probably not a good thing to say as a human.
So did you used to run quite regularly? Sorry, in the military?
A few times a year, we would have a physical fitness test. And for like 6 weeks leading up to that, I would run. And then the rest of the year, mostly not, you know.
What was your mindset the years that you worked through that injury? You've alluded to it already. You kept in touch with the lifts. You kept your mind open to the possibility that you could return to competitive powerlifting. Were you holding on to hope, or was it you're going to lift to some extent most of your life for the rest of your life anyway? Or how did you get through what was quite a significant period of time?
I was really interested in strength and just have always been interested in wanting to be strong. So kind of the way that the arc that it took for me is probably starting in 2014, I started having pain that would creep into training, and then eventually it was disruptive to competing, and this got worse and worse over like a 2-year period. And you do all the things that you do to try to rehab it or fix it or whatever, and it would work for a little while, and then it would get worse, and it was just getting gradually worse, and my total was going down. And so after the 2016 nationals, I said, you know what, I'm just not doing this anymore. I'm tired of training that hurts. I'm tired of, you know, feeling like I'm getting worse. I'm not going to sign up for another competition until I get this sorted out. And I'm just going to stop doing stuff that hurts for a while, which for me was squats and deadlifts. I could still bench. But I said, look, I still care about being strong. So can I do anything else? You know, it turned out that I tried a bunch of different things, and it turned out that the thing I could do that was most appealing to me was front squats. And I could do front squats as heavy as I wanted, and that was fine. So I said, okay, well, my competitive lifts are now front squat, bench press, and pull-ups. And those are the things that I care about. And I'm going to treat it like you would any other power lifts. And, you know, so I had training blocks and block reviews and everything like you would. I did accessory work for front squats, you know, like just like you treating it like you would any other power lifter. And part of the reason why it took a long time is, and there was probably a bit of burnout from dealing with like painful training. That just sucks, you know, and like getting so disconnected from the actual power lifts. And, you know, I started to develop goals for my front squat, you know, like I really cared about being able to front squat 600 pounds. And I thought, you know what, once I do this, then I'll maybe start to transition back to powerlifting. Ironically, it wasn't until I transitioned back to powerlifting that I was actually able to do that. But yeah, you know, I mean, these things are probably more synergistic than I appreciated at the moment. But yeah, it was as much that as anything else. Like probably taking a year or two would have been plenty, you know. And in fact, Bryce Krawczyk, who I've coached forever and ever, had a very similar sort of issue to me in terms of the way it presented, at least like pain in a similar spot in his glute that was kind of acted the same. But he didn't take a competitive break. we just had a lot better handle on how to do load management at that time, and say, well, like, what can you tolerate? Well, you don't have to, I'm going to squat, 3 times a week or nothing, maybe I just don't squat at all. There's a lot of in between here, you could even squat once a month, imagine that, and if that's all you can tolerate, then that's all you can tolerate. And there's this whole gradient. I would definitely tackle that period much, much differently if I was going to do it again, but you live and learn, I guess.
Did you find that it affected your identity as a lifter or as a coach at all? Because I know, like, I've gone back through periods of kind of not being competitive, of things getting in the way, and people, sometimes an athlete will be like, oh, so when are you next competing? And you're like, well, I'm not. Or maybe they notice that you don't squat at the moment. Do you manage to keep those different, or like, does that affect either your identity as a lifter or your identity as a coach within the powerlifting space?
It did a little bit. Whenever I would go to competitions, I would, miss it. I wish that I was doing it, but I was really lucky as well. By being a coach, I was still able to go to a lot of the same competitions. So I was able to preserve a lot of the same social circles and things like that. I would imagine that, taking a step back and then also losing all the rest of it that goes with it would be much more difficult. Yeah.
So
I could still kind of think of myself in similar terms because, well, I'm not doing the back squat, but I'm doing the front squat. And, I even joked for a while because this is when Jezza was doing a lot of his really insane front squats. And I'm blanking on his name now, but there was a guy, he was an untested guy who I think he lived near Chicago. I'm blanking on his name, but he was doing some incredible front squats as well. And I joked at the time, like, I should have all these guys come to my garage and we'll call it the Front Squat World Championship.
You could make your own sport, like how strength lifting replaced the bench with the overhead press. You could have your own version of powerlifting where you front squat instead of back squat.
Well, we had the 3 lift, right? It was
the
front squat, bench press, pull up. So
yeah,
it'd be quite an interesting competition, actually.
I think you should run that online. You'll have at least 3 people enter.
Well, I'm not doing front squats. My front squats are abhorrent. I think my forearms are too long compared to my upper arm, and so that the bar ends up somewhere on my neck.
Gotta print you some front squat handles, man.
Yeah. One thing that I think you kind of touched on when you were talking about being self-coached and the qualities that it takes to do that. Are there any particular qualities that you, I guess, see in yourself that have led to your success as a coach, or that you kind of look for when, I guess, either working with coaches or bringing coaches onto your team?
I mean, when we bring coaches on, absolutely, yeah. There's a whole process and procedure to it, but it's difficult to kind of think of all the different ways that shakes out off the top of my head, but you look for a lot of the things that you might look for in a coach. There's certain skills and knowledge areas that are probably important, but that can all be learned. Things that are more difficult to learn is just a willingness to pay attention, a willingness to engage with the problem and learn. And there's some like coaching philosophy alignment stuff that I think is really important. And I've developed more clarity on that over time as well. We talk about coaching being about leadership, relationship, and creative problem solving. And I mean, I suppose that's not earth-shattering by itself. I think most people would agree that that's kind of how they approach coaching. But other things like I'm big on a athlete first mindset, which I find that a lot of people are willing to agree with in principle, but if you run it to ground, then it does affect decision making in some key ways. Like how far are you willing to go on individualization aspects of training? Like I'm willing to go, I think, pretty far. And it's different if you think that, there might be a distinction without a real difference. And that's maybe a point of discussion that's worthwhile. But, I just find that athletes can be successful in a lot of different ways. And I want to have systems that can support all those different ways. I don't want to be, a super expert coach in this really one narrow system. And if I get an athlete who is not fitting with that system, then I just throw up my hands and go, sorry, can't help you. If my job is to help the athlete, then I need to have enough tools available that we can do that more often than not. Of course, there's a scope of practice issue here, right? That some things really are outside of your expertise and you need to recognize that. But let's have a broad expertise to the extent that it's possible.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it is interesting that you mentioned that, the technical stuff can be taught, but sort of the aptitude and attitude is something you have to look for.
Yeah.
It's something I've heard talked about in the business space as well, as people moving away from technical hires and moving towards like attitude hires, because it's a lot easier to teach someone something to make an attitude adjustment.
Yeah, John on our team talks about this a lot. Like someone has to have the skill and the will. The skill can be taught, the will maybe not so much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but I mean, from a business standpoint, it's putting the right person in the right seat. That you may have the desire to be a good coach, but not really the desire to do the marketing side of things, or maybe administrative stuff just is a total drag. But then other people, don't experience that the same way. So putting the right people in the right seats is kind of the job, I guess.
Yeah. I once heard it said that once you own a business, or every business becomes a recruiting business, or at some point, like as soon as you get large enough, your job is recruiting. It's no longer got like the main thing you do isn't the main thing you do anymore. It's about getting the right people in to do it.
And that's another thing that has absolutely changed over time. And I don't know, like I find the business stuff really interesting, and I hear from people that tell me that they would wish I would talk about it more, but I'm somewhere in between. Like, hey, I know I've done this for a long time and I've learned a lot along the way, but I also still don't feel like I'm an actual expert on it. Like I feel like I'm still in the stage of like, I must be making just tons of mistakes, so yeah, I think I see that, but like in my own work, I still spend a lot of time coaching, and I can make the argument that this is Hayden's program hopping, but applied to business, maybe. Like I could make the argument that it's really important for me to stay connected to coaching, and I like it, so it's easy to make that argument. But from a pure business standpoint, would it be better if I didn't spend that time and I could instead reinvest that time into some other aspect of growing the business? Some days it looks like that would be a better use of time, but other days not so much.
But it's the same as one of the reasons why we train. It keeps us connected to our lifters and what they're doing. Right. So as a business owner, to be in the role that you're asking other people to facilitate for your athletes, it just keeps you in touch, keeps you grounded, keeps you up to date with all the latest stuff. And probably the reason, after all these years, you're still learning because the world is constantly changing.
I must think that more often than not, because that's what I'm doing, and I think it comes back to self-coaching a bit, because it helps me stay connected with that aspect of my life and my interests as well. So it is important. Like, I think the staying grounded aspect of it is important, but you could easily make the argument that these other aspects of it are important too. They're just I find it a bit harder to talk about. Like, and harder to quantify as well. If you're running a business and you need to generate a certain amount of revenue, then coaching athletes is a very specific way to do that. Whereas, if you're maybe developing a piece of marketing content, that's harder to quantify. If you're recruiting or having a conversation with a vendor or something like that, like, does that actually go anywhere? Or are you just talking? Or like, so all that stuff is harder to quantify, but still important in the grand scheme of things. So again, this is just me hand wringing a little bit, going like, I don't know what's going on sometimes, but I hope that's everyone.
That's what keeps it interesting. If you knew what was going on, it'd get boring.
Yeah, probably. Then I'd change the program.
I just assume that in the background you apply the same systematic approach that you apply to coaching to your business. I'm like, he has to do that. He has to be applying systems to everything because that's how his brain works.
Yeah, we try to. We do have a joke in like team meetings of like, how many emerging strategies references do we have to things that are definitely not training related at all. Talk about like doing a block review on some marketing campaign or something like that. Right?
Yeah, time to peak for a launch or something. Like, what's the ideal launch time? Like, is 6 weeks too long? Is 4 weeks better for launching a new product? We need the Emerging Strategies Business Handbook. That's, I think, the next thing. Hey, we're coming up on time here for you, and I want to respect the rest of your day. What do you have? Do you have anything coming up that people might be interested in that you wanted to chat about? I know you've got the stuff at Stance coming up. We've got the seminar in Germany. Was there anything else cool that you've got on the horizon?
I mean, those are the two big ones. I'm really looking forward to the seminar in Germany. I'm just enjoying doing seminars again. For a long time, those kind of stopped. And then last summer when I moved back to Europe, now all of a sudden there's interest in it again. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So I've got what I think is a good program developed, and I'm improving on it kind of every time we do one of these. So I hope that it's good information. And just to talk about it maybe a bit less abstractly as well, I find that seminars can be a lot of sitting in one place and listening to someone talk. So I tried to make it a lot more interactive. And now when you think of interactivity as part of a powerlifting seminar, lots of times people think, okay, we're all going to the gym, we're all going to do squats. Coach is going to watch us do squats. And I don't know that that's where I can really provide the best value. There's lots of coaches who probably have a better technical eye than me. I tend to be pretty open to lots of different ways of solving that movement problem. And besides, if you're squatting at a seminar, you're probably on your best behavior anyway. And so how applicable is this to your regular training? So what we did is developed a bunch of different practical exercises. We're going to talk a lot about programming, which is great. I think that powerlifters like to nerd out on programming. So let's do that, but also let's make sure that we're taking those things that we learned and making them applicable. How are we going to use this, like actually use this in our program writing and our coaching practice? So like I bring with me a bunch of block reviews, and we're going to look at these block reviews, and we're going to write a program, and we're going to see firsthand, how do we get the information from this athlete's log and go, okay, this is the thing that they're actually responding well to, or this is what the training log is pointing to. And it helps me to see people's thought process, and helps them to see the utility in different tools and stuff that are available to them. And also gives me some really great ideas on training, because people at seminars come up with some really cool stuff, and I go, man, I didn't think about that before. I'm gonna take this idea and take it back home with me. Maybe I'll get my bench moving. So win-win all around, I hope.
I think that was definitely the case from that seminar in Brussels, was the fact that it was so interactive, that we got the VBT apps out, and we had a look at that, and we had a chance to kind of not just like, you tell us what stress index is, but like, okay, let's actually use it. I think it really helped to have some practical examples and just actually break up the day. I think it's so much more engaging. So no, I'm really looking forward and pretty stoked that you've agreed to come down and give one in Tübingen, because it's pretty exciting. And I think I'm
really looking forward to it. That's going to be a good time. Yeah.
And good. All the very best for your nationals coming up next week as well. We'll be watching, cheering.
Thank you.
I want to see you in South Africa.
Yeah. We'll hopefully get to see a lot of folks there. I'm getting familiar with South Africa, but this will be supposedly in a different city. So I've talked about wanting to go like shark diving for a long time, and apparently that's something that you can do. So I'll just put the word out there now. If anybody's interested in going shark diving with me,
it's a big enough tank.
Hit me up. Yeah, we're gonna go. This is gonna be a thing. It'll be like powerlifters. Lots of times, especially you go on these trips, you're far from home. You get to do cool stuff, see cool things. This time it's shark diving. Let's go. Get a bunch of old lifters, and we're gonna go swim with sharks. So what could go wrong?
That's fantastic.
For the highest quality, personalized online coaching that will see you achieving your best powerlifting results, book a call with one of our expert coaches at Barbell and Beyond. We specialize in competition prep, nutrition for powerlifting, and helping you develop an elite athlete mindset. All of that and more can be found over at barbellandbeyond.online.